What's up, guys? It's Josh Law here with the Card Guys, and today we're going to be talking about every single matchup in the game for Sir Bolton, Breaker of Dawn. This is going to be very, very similar to the Dorinthea video I made a couple days ago. If you haven't seen that, you can go check that out. But basically, I wanted to talk about all the matchups, talk about the sideboarding, general plan, the threats of each matchup, and just talk about the general mindset, whether you should be going quicker or slower, and any important sideboard cards that I think are useful. So as you can see here, we have a chart. So the x-axis here is easy to pilot versus hard to pilot. So this is talking about things like, is the matchup one that has a complicated sideboard? Is it one that has complicated decision making? Is this a matchup that is difficult to defend the attack pattern from the opponent? Is this a matchup that you have to takes a lot of strain on your resources? Is this one that you have to be very cognizant of a few particular key cards, etc.? Don't construe that with whether it is favorable or unfavorable. These are actually two independent things. Just because something is hard to pilot does not necessarily mean it is favorable or unfavorable. This is kind of like, how much wiggle room do you have, and how much time does it take to get to a level where you'll be able to run the deck at its full efficiency. Y-axis here, we have favorable or unfavorable. Fairly straightforward here. If you played 100 games against an opponent of equal skill level at the highest level of play, what would the matchup look like, and who would be favored? All right, so I guess we'll do this in the same order that we did the Dorinthea video in. We'll do this kind of chronologically. Obviously, Bolton didn't exist until Monarch, so WTR ARC. It's not really going to tell a story, but from Monarch onward, I'll be able to tell you like a little bit of a story about Bolton and how he's done in the last couple sets. All right, let's start with Rhinar again. So this is a matchup where I think it is slightly favorable and fairly easy to pilot. Reason being, Rhinar has no interaction with your deck, and unless they run Command and Conquer, which is actually fairly rare because things like Blood Rush Bellow require, not require, but want your attacks to be brute attacks. And, you already have a bunch of 6s, so the chance of Rhinar running CNC is actually pretty low. And just Rhinar in general does not have any cards that interact with what we're doing. I should say this up front, that this is a hybrid Bolton style that we're talking about. We're talking about a deck that runs Centauri Sabers in certain matchups and Raiden in certain matchups. And we might talk about Jubil a little bit later. I think there's actually a possibility for Jubil to be pretty good as well. Anyways, so I'd put Rhinar over here. Why is this easy to pilot? No interaction with your deck. Also, if he's intimidating your cards, you really don't have a choice in what you do on your turn. So oftentimes you're just forced to make a particular line. That's just how it is. The only tricky thing is, like, if he intimidates, 2 cards, and then maybe you're holding 2 cards and there's a barraging beat down there, and one of those 2 cards is a combo piece. There might be some decision making there, but overall I'd say pretty straightforward. Even if the Rhinar is running Pummel, still fairly straightforward because you're going to be running the 0 cost D reacts anyways. It should be pretty simple. And if the Rhinar ever goes for like a play with Scab Skims and fails, you probably just won the game. Pretty favorable matchup. I'm going to put this like, I'd say this is about 70-30 in our favor, so I put it about here. Right. Let's move on. Bravo. This is a unfavorable matchup. Let's talk about why. So the dominate mechanic is kind of annoying for our deck to deal with because we're running Centaur Sabers against them. You could run Raiden against them. I think that's fine, but I would actually prefer to combo them. So, because you have to put combo pieces into the arsenal, that makes you very vulnerable to things like Crippling Crush, Spinal Crush. You don't have a ton of armor either. So, basically, you have to set up the piece in the arsenal, and you have to kind of wait for them to have an off turn, which means an off turn means they don't have pummel or relevant on hit, so it's a little bit tricky there. But I think if you can get the combo off in a reasonable amount of time, you should be fine. I would say this is fairly easy to pilot. Even though they have a lot of interaction with us, and they have a lot of on-hit effects, oftentimes if they just have the pummel or have enough energy to activate Bravo, there's very little that we can do. So we kind of just have to take it on the chin and kind of wait for them to brick. So there's not a lot of decision making to be made here. So yeah, I'm going to put him kind of here. I think this is actually probably like 35, 65. So pretty favorable for the Bravo. Again, pretty straightforward to pilot as well. All right, let's talk about Katsu. Katsu is... So the ninja class in general has no interaction with us and can't defend our combo at all. Of note, you want to go first against these two decks. I should be mentioning that. I actually think in general going second is not too bad as Bolton, because if your opponent wants to take tempo back, they have to take some damage, which comboing them when they're at 35 or 30 is actually a pretty big difference. So generally I'd choose second, but against Rhinar and Bravo, their turn 0 starts are too good, so you don't want to let them go first. All right. In terms of Katsu, though, you could gladly let them go first. It's not a huge deal. You might take some Kodachi damage, but so be it. Anyway, so the ninjas can't defend very well against your deck because they have attack actions. They have no interaction with your deck, so this is quite favorable. The Crouching Tiger line can be kind of annoying because they can have quite... like, if their explosive turn lines up with your combo turn, they probably output just as much damage as you do if you're no blocking. So I think the only main thing is, like, the only decision making here, I would say, is like if you have your combo turn and then they're going off with their Roar of the Tiger turn, that could be a little bit tricky. But overall, this is fairly straightforward, even more favorable than the Rhinar matchup. And decision making, yeah, it's probably about here. It's not difficult at all. You just have to learn how to block the Mask of Momentum triggers, which, I mean, you want to block anyways as this deck, so shouldn't be too difficult. The only tricky thing is that you only have one instance of Gallantry Gold, one instance of Courage of Bladehold, so you do have to kind of use them at the right times. All right. Finally, we have Dorinthea. So I do have a public deck list for Bolton, and there's quite a lot of data on that. And the data would suggest that Bolton is favored into Dorinthea. However, I don't actually think that's the case. On my Dorinthea video, I said that Dorinthea was favored, and I still believe that to be true. The main reason is that Dorinthea blocks the combo really, really well. And also blocks all of your turns prior to comboing off. And you also need extra soul to combo against Dorinthea, which gives her extra time. You do have 9 DBX. That obviously helps a tremendous amount. Soul Shield is a great card against Dorinthea. But you have to play post-game against Dorinthea, which is not the easiest thing to do. Because you probably don't have Courageous Steel Hand in your deck against Dorinthea because it blocks for 2. So your post combo is going to rely on Take Flight via the Vanguard, Beacon of Victory. And I think if you can't find that in a reasonable amount of time, the Dorinthea probably will get tempo advantage on you. And I think if you played 100 matches against Dorinthea, you'd probably win 35 of them or so. So yeah, I'd say this is slightly unfavorable for Bolton, but definitely within the realm of possibility. In terms of easy or hard to pilot, I'd say this is again slightly easier. I mean, you obviously have to understand what the Dorinthea deck can do to you, and that's really the toughest part, is understanding what they can do. There's really generally you're going to be charging off Soul Shield plus your Halo in turn 0, so you have to find probably one. The tricky thing is you have to find one extra turn somewhere to get that 4th soul charge, because generally you want to combo with 4 soul, because there is a chance if they have Crown of Providence and, you know, blocking very efficiently, that they can shut down your combo. But yeah, other than that, I'd say it's not too difficult. It's just mainly understanding what the Dorinthea could do to you. Your deck already does decently, but the post game can be a little tricky. You kind of have to know how to navigate that as well. So I'm going to put it about here. Right, moving on. Let's talk about Dash. So in the past, this was one of the easiest matchups in the game for Bolton, because Dash had no interaction with you, other than triple T-Bone or Meganetic Shockwave or something like that. Generally, you're never going to get T-Boned more than twice, but now that they have access to Pulse Wave Harpoon, this can become a little bit tricky, because they could sit on that and kind of wait. So actually, I think the best approach for Bolton against Dash is actually to take a hedging sideboard. So this means you bring in, you take out all your no blocks and you bring in your Helm of the Sharp Eye, because Helm of the Sharp Eye helps with Combustible Courier. And you need to kind of play it by ear. If you can fatigue the Dash, go for it. If the Dash is playing really slowly, or they, you know, flip over a pistol, they don't flip over Pounder. If they don't, if they flip over Hanabi Blaster or Talishar or Pounder, or you know, a combination of those, then you know they're playing aggro into you. You can kind of play it by ear and see if you can fatigue them. But if you do go for the combo, it's a little bit risky if they've been sitting on an Arsenal card for a while, because that could be Pulse Wave Harpoon, and they're just waiting for you to no block, and then they play that, and then if they do that, you probably lost the game. So that's something to consider. This is a matchup that I think is still favorable, but you need to... This is actually a little bit harder to play. I'd say kind of maybe about here. Somewhere around there would be about right. I think it's like slightly favorable, maybe 55 or 60. It used to be way up here, but you know, I think that single card plus the fact that Dash also has things that can interact with your armor. There's the one that says gives it -1 to the combat chain, so that's, you got to be kind of careful when you block with your courage. So, with all that said, if you can combo off, go for it. If you got a good read that you can fatigue them, go for that as well. Again, this is a matchup where you don't want them to go first, because their turn 0 plays are really good. They have Spark of Genius, Tekla Pounder, Tekla Core. If they're playing the more defensive style, they could drop a Chamber turn 1. They could drop a Plasma Purifier turn 1. They could heal with, if they're Tree Frog Dash, they could heal a bunch. So you never want to let Dash go first. and you definitely definitely a little bit tricky to pilot because you have to identify very quickly what your game plan needs to be. And you have to be quite disciplined in following that game plan. But if you do that, not the most hard matchup. I'd actually put it closer to here. All right, moving on. Viscerai. So one of the reasons to play Bolton is that you have a very good matchup against all the aggro decks. And Viscerai is no exception here. Viscerai has no interaction with your deck. And they are fast, but they're not insanely fast. And, you know, the Mob Skies on hit is never going to trigger against your deck because you want to block anyways. And you have a little bit of armor to deal with breakpoints. And just in general, they're just not quite quick enough to deal with you. None of the new cards really help them do anything to you. So yeah, favorable matchup. Probably just near Katsu. I'd say it's a little bit more tricky to defend against Viscerai. Actually, is it? Hold on. No, it's not. Viscerai is actually easier to defend against than Katsu, so we'll kind of move them there. Well, they're basically in the same place. Katsu, I guess you have to defend against the massive momentum triggers is a little bit trickier, whereas Viscerai is very face up on what they're doing. So we're going to put them over there. Another, comfortable 70-30 matchup there. All right. Azalea. Potentially a tricky matchup because, again, similar to Bravo, you put your D-Reacts into the arsenal, and then you don't have your combo pieces in the arsenal, right? So if you have your combo pieces, you don't have your D-Reacts there. And some of the on-hit effects are quite detrimental. Having only one action point, having your like things that put your arsenal on the bottom of the deck. Like there's a lot of on-hit effects that are actually relevant. And unlike Bravo, only one of the damage needs to hit. So there's that. The good news is that Azalea rarely can utilize a 5-card hand super effectively because they can't. Rarely are they going to shoot 2 arrows at you. So they do waste a little bit of damage here and there. And on your combo turn, Azalea can't block effectively because she doesn't have very many 3-block non-attack actions. So fairly favorable there. I'd say it's, in terms of favorable or unfavorable, it's probably about slightly favored towards Bolton, but I haven't played this enough to really know for sure. Yeah, I'd put this slightly favored towards Bolton. Easy or hard to pilot? Again, I guess it's kind of like the Bravo situation. If they have the disruption at the right time, if they have the dominate at the right time, and you don't have a D-React in Arsenal, there's very little you can do. You just have to pick the right card to block with and move on with your life. So yeah, we're going to put Azalea kind of over there. All right, final matchup. It's Kano. This is a very, very mindless matchup because both players are trying to execute a combo and neither player interacts with the other player. So I don't run Oasis against Kano because there's just not enough deck slots. So you basically, all you have to do is try to combo off as fast as possible, save your Halo, and run AB1. So you can Halo AB1 the Wildfire, and that should barely be enough to win you the match. You don't need the Gallantry Gold against Kano because they only have 30 life, so comboing for 24 should be plenty. Yeah, so slightly favored because Spell Void is very nice against Kano. Mind-numbingly easy to pilot. Probably about the same as Rhinar in terms of favorable. Yeah, mind-numbingly easy to pilot because there's no interaction, and the sideboarding is very straightforward. You just up your blue count a little bit and try to go for it. The game is generally over in like 4 turns. If you combo them, so the average combo speed of Bolton is actually like between 4 and 5 turns, right? So if you combo off turn 4, they probably die. You combo off turn 5, it's probably even. If you're slower than that, oh, it could be tough because you've probably taken a lot of chip damage, and Kano's going to tempt you a lot to use your Halo, so just resist that temptation and you should be fine. This is a matchup where I would go first if possible. I think I've been kind of skipping that. So Rhinar, Kano, Azalea, Bravo. I'd probably want to go first. Against Dash, I'd also want to go first. But Viscerai, Katsu, Dory, it's okay going second. Bolton's fine going first or second. It's mainly like, can my opponent do something ridiculous on turn 0? And if they can, you don't want to give them the chance for that. Okay, that is all the ARC heroes. Talking about mind-numbing matchups, the mirror is also mind-numbing. There's nothing to say about this. It's obviously it's neither favorable or unfavorable. Go second if you can in the mirror and combo off faster than your opponent, because if you do, you generally win. The only way that doesn't auto win the game is if they combo and you have like 36 health or something, and then you drop to like 2, and then you crack back with a triple Lumina. That's the only way you're gonna win if they combo first, right? Yeah. All right. The other Monarch hero is Levia. Similar to Reinhardt, very little interaction with our deck. And this is the only downside, the only thing that makes this a slightly harder than Reinhardt is, in terms of favorability, is that they have access to Soul Harvest, which could potentially hit for 12. And that would banish our whole soul if it hits. So you got to be really, really careful, including cards that block for less than 3 in this matchup. But yeah, in general, the Bolton deck is just fast enough to deal with these aggressive but not hyper aggressive decks. And yeah, so this is a matchup where you're totally fine going second. Unlike Reinhardt, she can't do anything too ridiculous on turn 0. Again, fairly easy to pilot because they have no interaction. Slightly less favorable than Reinhardt, I'd say, but yeah, it's probably easier than... I'm going to put it over here. It's kind of hard. I'll put it like right here behind Katsu. Mainly, what makes this a little bit harder to pilot is they have the Soul Harvest, and they also have... Let's just face it, people don't play against Levia a lot, so you might not be aware of their attack pattern. There's also some Levias that are running Pummel as well, so if they're running like Tunic, you got to be a little bit careful, right? Okay. Lexi. Oh, this is a nightmare. This is one of the hardest heroes to play against, and is definitely unfavorable. It's very, very difficult to execute your game plan against Lexi, because a single Frostbite makes your defense awkward, and it makes your offense awkward, and you leak a ton of damage. They have on-hit effects, and it's just really, really, really tough to deal with them in general. If they're playing the the style with the Death Dealer, they can get Dominate, and there's a lot of damage that leaks through. You get a ton of frostbites against that style, and it's just kind of a nightmare to deal with. This is actually one of the matchups I might consider running Raiden. And this is another matchup similar to Dash where I actually might just try to fatigue Lexi. So you kind of have to decide on that plan very early, even earlier than against Dash, because Dash you can run a hedging sideboard. Lexi you kind of have to pick before the match what you're doing. And even if you pick wrong, it's going to be really, really tough to pilot your way out of that. In addition to that, they have a ton of on-hit effects. Bolton hates frostbites, so definitely a tough matchup there. Yeah. This is a matchup where first or second doesn't really matter a ton. If you go first and don't put enough pressure on Lexi, they're going to load up with Voltaire anyways. Probably leaning towards going second against Lexi, just because that extra tempo damage would be valuable. All right. Okay, we're moving through Tales of Aria. Briar, very similar to Viscerai. It's a favorable matchup, and they don't have any interaction for your deck. Probably a little bit harder to pilot against because Briar actually has on-hit effects. I mean, Briar literally has on-hit effects every single attack, right? So you need to be aware of that. Also, Briar is more susceptible to bricking than Viscerai. I'd say Viscerai is slightly more consistent than Briar. And because of that, if they get a hand of all attacks, all non-attacks, that basically will lose them the game, because if you actually get a turn pre-combo to attack the Briar, their health is going to drop below 30. And then the combo will basically kill them. This is not a matchup that you need to really understand how to play post-combo. Generally just set up a V, set up a beacon. It's very, very straightforward on how to close the game against them. The only thing that can be a little bit difficult is recognizing if they're going to play, if they're going to flash in a Force of Nature with their boots. So that's something you kind of have to be aware of. If you get kind of a read that they're trying to do that, you might need to block at +1. Other than that, very straightforward deck to play against. And they have no interaction with us. As you can see, everything over here in this corner has no interaction with us, which makes it favorable and straightforward to play. But we're about to talk about decks that are absolute nightmares for us. So in the post-chain Seeds of... Chain was ridiculous in Monarch, and Seeds of Agony got banned. After Seeds of Agony got banned, there was a couple months before Tales of Aria, and even in early Tales of Aria, Bolton was in a very nice spot because a lot of the decks did not have interaction with him, and I mean, ice heroes other than Oldhim didn't really exist. And Prism was around, and Prism was kind of bullying the Oldhims around, so there wasn't really the metagame was actually fairly favorable for Bolton about a year ago. But as you can see, we're about to talk about the final hero in Tales of Aria, and about the Uprising heroes and Dynasty heroes, and it's about to get a lot worse. Right now this looks like a very rosy picture, right? Because oh wow, we have so many favorable matchups and they're all easy to pilot. It sounds great, right? Well, I'm about to tell you about Oldhim, which is really, really hard to pilot. Probably not as unfavorable as Lexi, but harder to pilot. Let's talk about Oldhim and why this is so difficult to pilot. So first of all, if you're playing Raiden against Oldhim, your attack pattern has to be perfect because of Stalagmite, if they're running Stalagmite, and because of their ice react. So normally how you play Raiden, you put your V in the arsenal and you kind of wait for a big hand, then you go, right? Against Oldhim, you have to do that in reverse. You have to put your follow-up into the arsenal, so Bolting Blade, Lumina Ascension, Valiant Thrust, whatever, into the arsenal. Because if you leave cards in hand on a big turn, a competent Oldhim is going to ice react that and turn his blue 2 block into a 6 block, 7 block, 8 block, possibly a 9 block. So you basically have to always be cognizant of that. If you're playing the Saber combo against Oldhim, things got a little bit easier with Spirit of Arena. Now you don't actually have to be so worried about Blizzard because you can just flash in the Luminas. So if you have E-Pot or Spirit of Arena in play, you're fine against that. But there is a little bit of threat if you're slow that you get fatigued in this matchup. So, having a Remembrance in your deck is very important, and knowing how to handle the game post-combo is also very important. So if you're playing the Saber combo, not only do you have to know how to combo properly, you also have to know how to handle the post-combo with Sabers, which is basically like handling it with Raiden. So you have to understand how to play both of them properly. And you have to manage your resources very, very carefully in this matchup. This is a matchup where you're probably going to charge off a Soul Shield a couple times. Not charge, but get a few soul counters with that. And this is a matchup where you have to run Helm of the Sharp Eye because you need 4 armor against Oldhim. Because you cannot combo against a Frosty Hammer. Because if you get a Frostbite, that means you have to pitch for your combo starter. So let's say you pitch a card. You play your combo starter, you charge a card, now you have 1 card in hand. That is your Lumina or Beacon. That gets ice reacted away, you lose the game, right? So you cannot have a Frostbite on your combo turn. I get asked a lot why I'm running Helm of the Sharp Eye against Oldhim. Not only that, but Helm of the Sharp Eye also can give you extra burst on your combo turn, right? So what you can do is you can attack 5 times with your weapons, activate Helm of the Sharp Eye, because your weapons will be hitting for 5, base is 2. If you get something nice, you can play that there, and then continue on. If you have Spirit of Arena, you can actually Helm before the combo, because if you find a Lumina off of the Helm, and you have Spirit of Arena in play, you can actually play that. So those are just 2 little optimizations to be aware of. But yeah, in general, this is a pretty tough matchup. Slightly favored to the Oldhim. Especially if the Oldhim is more aggressive. Frost Fang is annoying. Pummel CNC is annoying. Defending against Oldhim and attacking into Oldhim is tricky, right? And if you're not very experienced at this matchup, it's going to be, way down here. But you get better, I think you can get this to a 40 or 45. It's still going to be very tricky. If you mess up, you can instantly lose the game. So yeah. All right, moving on. Let's just knock all these Frost heroes out. Icelander, another hero that is probably harder to pilot against than Oldhim. And even more unfavorable. The main reason is that you have to play Raiden into Icelander. I think actually you can play Jubil as well into Icelander, but I haven't tested that enough. But on paper, I think that might be better because sometimes you're left with 1 card. Or you have to, like, they're sending like 7-8 damage at you with like an auto attack, right? Or an attack action. So you have to block with 2 or 3 cards. And then you can't do much with your last card. So I'm just thinking maybe there's a better strategy against Icelander than playing Raiden. Obviously, you can't play the Saber combo against them because Hypothermia exists, Channel Lake Frigid exists, Blizzard not only you have to pay 2, but then you also get a Frostbite, so you have to pay 3 essentially. So playing the combo against Icelander is really, really tough. Would not recommend. But whether or not the Raiden style or Jubil is actually better, haven't tested that enough. But my current plan is to play Raiden against Icelander. And in order to play Raiden against Icelander, you have to try to execute a big turn with Helm of the Sharp Eye via the Vanguard on a turn with minimal disruption. That is easier said than done, because not only do you have to have a big turn, you have to have a big turn on a turn where they don't have disruption. They have like 15 cards in their deck that are backbreakingly disruptive against us on our big turns. So it is what it is, right? Definitely a winnable matchup, but probably at least 70% in the Icelander's favor. And this is just kind of a matchup you kind of just hope to dodge. You have fairly polarizing matchups as Bolton, actually. You notice Dorinthea had a little bit tighter of a spread up and down because just her playstyle is a little bit more stable, whereas Bolton has really good matchups and really bad matchups, and that's kind of just what you have to deal with. Just in general, Frostbite's very difficult for the deck to deal with, and even if you're running like 15 blues, so you're running like the 12 charge cards plus Epot, it's still not quite enough. You like, in order to play against these Ice Heroes, you may actually even need to go up to like 18, 19, 20 to have a smooth aggro plan against them. All right, I guess we'll keep talking about tough matchups. This is probably the worst matchup for Bolton, all things considered. But it's not actually that hard to pilot. It's just bad. So what makes this a nightmare matchup? They have Tumultai in their deck. First of all, I don't think you can play Raiden against Dromai, because the Dromai player actually blocks pretty well, and they can block with most of their cards and return damage. And if we're trying to like clean up the dragons, all it takes is one good rake to have, a board state that we can't really clear effectively. So I would not recommend playing Raiden against Dromai, and you have to take quite a bit of risk playing Sabres against Dromai, because if Tumultai is in the top 20 of their deck, you probably lose. But you just have to go for it. You have to go as fast as you can, combo off as fast as you can. Now the tricky part is that post combo, you probably didn't deal that much damage to them because they actually block your combo turn decently. They have Furnace. They probably have Crown of Providence if they want. They can have a decent amount of armor, and their dragons block for 3. They don't give you the buff. So the situation post combo is that she's probably in the teens in terms of health, and there are dragons on the board. You possibly healed to about 40. But that's not really enough, mainly because you don't have any more burst turns other than via the Vanguard. And she can easily 9 block, 12 block if she wants, and just chip in damage with her current board state. And she can also heal with the Sigil of Solace out of Beacon of Victory range. And your soul is probably not very large as well. So closing the Dromai matchup is probably the hardest in the game. You have to find a closer very quickly, and you have to be you probably have to find 2, maybe even 3 closers, which is asking a lot, because Dromai blocks so well, and some of the dragons you have to kill. It's really, really tough to deal with them. Is it insanely hard to pilot? No, because you're just trying to combo as quickly as you can. But your post combo is complicated. That's why it's not over here. Over here, I consider, anything on this side, comboing is easy, post-combo is easy. Whereas here, kind of in the middle, comboing is easy, but post-combo is a little bit hard. Notably, Dorinthea blocks pretty well, Dromai blocks pretty well. So yeah, I think they're both pretty difficult. Anyways, Dromai, probably the hardest hero to play against. This is probably 80-20 in Dromai's favor. All right. All right. So that was a lot of doom and gloom. Let's talk about a good matchup. All right. So Phi, this is a favorable matchup. So I used to say that this was more favorable than Viscerai and Briar, but actually I've come down on that slightly. I'm going to put him kind of like here. Yeah, there seems pretty good. Phi, just like Katsu, can't block you very easily. And the only thing is that Phi's attack pattern is pretty difficult to deal with, and Phi also runs CNC sometimes. They also could be running Breaking Point, although that's a little bit rare. So defending against Phi's attack pattern is a little bit hard. You have to find your combo pretty quickly. This is a matchup where you're fine going second. I think going second is totally fine, because if your first turn can get him to like the mid-low 30s, your combo turn should force cards out of his hand. So that's one of the dangers, is that if you combo off and he can keep his whole hand, you might have healed to like 20, but then he can threaten your hand. And that just requires you to have a closer really, really quickly. But yeah, in general, very little interaction, but a little bit faster, probably the fastest deck. So you have less time to set up, but your deck is pretty fine blocking as well. So yeah. The only thing that's tricky is that you have to learn how to defend against a pretty annoying attack pattern. And CNC, if you get your arsenal blown up against Phi, you probably lose. All right, final hero, Arachne. I played against him several times. This is probably one of the weirder matchups, because Eradicate is really good against your deck, and getting your top card Fate Sealed means it's probably going to take you longer than you want to combo off. If you can combo off, you're probably favored, but you probably have lost a lot of cards as well, so there's potential to get fatigued. If you're running Remembrance and he just happens to banish your Remembrance, you're probably in a lot of trouble. This is probably the most tricky Saber combo to execute, in terms of, because there's a lot of indirect disruption. So it's actually probably going to take you a long time to combo against them. And Spider's Bites are really, really tough for you to deal with. So they're probably going to run double Spider's Bite, and Arachne has full tempo. So pre-combo, right? So they're going to go Spider's Bite, and now your card's blocked for 1. So that definitely makes it tricky. So sometimes you need to put cards on the first Spider's Bite and then kind of play it from there and see what they do. A little bit harder to pilot, I'd say. Probably slightly unfavored as well. Just because I think you can get fatigued, and they could Fate Seal you and put all your combo pieces at the bottom, and then Arachne also, when you combo off against them, is probably going to be near full life as well, because they're really happy to block with a single card, right? So I'd put Arachne probably slightly unfavored, and probably slightly hard to pilot, because if you start running out of threats, you're going to have to come up with a backup plan pretty quickly. And each game is like, everything on this side, the games kind of play the same. Whereas on this side, either they're very disruptive, or you have to make a decision really quickly, or they have a board state. But Arachne presents a unique problem in that, like, every game is going to be a little bit different. Like, based on what they banish, you're going to have less options on how to close the game. So you're going to have to understand how to close the game with limited resources, which is something that takes a little bit of practice. A little bit difficult, not super impossible though. All right. I think that is probably the end here. Let me look here. Yeah, I feel pretty happy with everything here. So as you can see, we have kind of a theme here. Over here, we have our race matchups where we don't have to think about anything. We have all of our saber combo matchups against decks that don't interact with us. We have decks over here that are, these two have dominate, and these two block really well. And they're just, you know, not the hardest to pilot against, but they can be kind of annoying. Dominate is really, really good against us. We have Dash over here, which I think is kind of, you know, you see there's only one deck in this quadrant, and I think that's true because this requires you to make a decision and be disciplined, which when you're playing defense most of the game, it can be a little bit tricky to remain disciplined because it just feels like you're getting your ass kicked the whole time. But if you're not disciplined and you're trying to fatigue Dash and you make one wrong block, that can actually lose you the game, right? So that's why I would say this is like a little bit hard to pilot, but still favorable. Because if you choose the right strategy and you pick your right timings, I think you're a little bit of a favorite there. These two heroes here are kind of unique, but they're kind of annoying as well. And you don't have a ton of agency over how to outplay them. If the right cards get banished, if they blow up your Courage of Bladehold, what can you do? Not much, right? And as for these three heroes here, these three heroes are probably the hardest in the game to deal with. Frostbites are annoying, on-hits are annoying, Blizzard is annoying, Channel Lake Frigid is annoying, Hypothermia is extra annoying, and they all require you to understand how to deal with that interaction and how to close games. And I'd say Icelander, this is like I said earlier, I think this is a hero that I have to look at Jubil a little bit because I think there might be a possibility where that's the correct choice. Although paying for Lumina Jubil swings doesn't sound super appealing to me. But if you have a blue and Tunic, maybe that's okay. We'll see. Yeah, anyways, that I think we'll wrap it up. Yeah, this has been Josh with TheCardGuyz. Hope that you've enjoyed this video. Hope that you've learned something about the matchups for Sir Bolton in Classic Constructed. There's also a Dorinthea video where I go through all the Dorinthea matchups as well. And if you're interested in that, you can check it out on the channel as well. All right, I'm going to get out of here. See ya. Take care.